They called him ordinary, a quiet man in a loud war, a soldier who followed orders, who did his job, who never stood out. But on a scorched night in a dying city, when the enemy closed in, betrayal moved through their ranks, and death waited above every rooftop. He heard a voice on the radio that changed everything. And in that moment, the man they never noticed became the one they could never forge. The desert city of Al-Sadr always looked like it was being swallowed by its own dust. Pale wind swept through its narrow stone alleys, peeling sand across windows and rooftops until everything turned the color of bone. Buildings leaned against each other like tired men. Broken glass glittered in the gutters. Sergeant Daniel Reeve walked through it all with the same heavy, patient stride he always had. Boots thudding, helmet low, rifle slung, eyes scanning, listening, always listening. Reeve wasn't a loud man. Not the one who told stories around the fire. Not the one who made people laugh under stress. Not the one who shouted orders or broke rules. He was the quiet one, the observer, the listener. And in Al-Sadr, listening meant survival. Bravo unit had arrived 3 days earlier, tasked with gathering intel on enemy positions within the city. Command believed the opposing force was preparing a surprise strike, and Bravo's job was to find it and cut it down before it spread. Though City was generous, Al-Sadr was more skeleton than structure. Reeve and his team moved through streets littered with shattered tiles and cracked water pipes. The sun made everything look too sharp, a world drawn in razors. Heat pressed against their backs like a hand forcing them to bow. Ahead, Lieutenant Marcus Diaz raised his fist, signaling stop. His voice came low. Eyes up. We're near Sector 4. The squad slowed. Birds lifted off rusted rebar beams. Sand rolled in lazy spirals down the street. Private Kellerman, jittery on his best day, wiped sweat from his brow. Every time we come into this district, I feel like the walls are breathing. Reeve didn't answer. He was listening. To the wind. To the distant hum of old generators. To the faint whisper of voices echoing through the empty rooms around them. They reached an abandoned storefront. Diaz motioned them inside. Reeve, Diaz, Kellerman, Sharp, and 2 more soldiers set up a monitoring station on the dusty tile floor. From here, they had a vantage point to track enemy radio frequencies, a scrambled mess of numbers and static, occasionally punctuated by coded bursts of speech. Kellerman unpacked the receiver. Diaz knelt beside him. Sharp stood watch by the shattered windows. Reeve? He simply sat and listened. Static crackled. Dust drifted through shafts of sunlight. Outside, the city murmured its slow death. Diaz checked the time. We're settling here for 2 hours. No chatter, no movement. Eyes and ears only. Reeve nodded. Silence, except for the receiver. Click. Static. Beep. Static. Numbers. Static. Then a voice. Faint. Compressed. Muffled. Reeve leaned forward. Hold on. Diaz looked up. You hear something? Reeve adjusted the dial, isolating the signal. North, 6, convoy movement confirmed. Kellerman whispered. That's them. Reeve kept listening. The voice continued. They'll pass Sector 9. Timing perfect. Route exposed. Diaz stiffened. That's our route. Sharp turned. What? Reeve said nothing. He was focusing, isolating, translating. The message was clear now. Won't miss the opportunity this time. 5 minutes after they enter the open street. Diaz exhaled. They're planning to ambush us. Reeve was still listening. Something was wrong. Something familiar. The voice, filtered and distant, carried a rhythm he knew. A cadence. A breath pattern. A slant in pronunciation. He leaned back. Heart pounding. Eyes locked on nothing. Kellerman frowned. What is it? Reeve didn't speak for a long moment. Then quietly. I know that voice. Diaz lowered his binoculars. What do you mean you know it? Reeve swallowed. That's one of ours. The room fell into silence. Not the quiet kind that made sleep easy, the sharp kind that made breathing hurt. Sharp stepped forward. You're sure? Reeve nodded. The sound hit him like a memory, sudden, unpleasant, undeniable. Lieutenant Diaz knelt beside the receiver. Which one of ours? Reeve hesitated, because saying the name made it real. Austin Price. Kellerman's eyes widened. No. No way. Price wouldn't. Diaz's voice dropped. Reeve doesn't make mistakes with audio. It was true. Reeve had been a communications specialist for years, decoding radio chatter, sorting truth from illusion. Price wasn't just another soldier. He'd been with Bravo Unit for months, trained with them, suffered with them, shared cigarettes and secrets. But recently, he was distant, colder, quieter than Reeve, if that was possible. Sharp shook his head. He's on patrol right now. Diaz's jaw tightened. We need to confirm. Now. He keyed into internal comms. Bravo 3, report status. Static. Bravo 3, respond. Finally. This is Price. Clear en route. Moving west. Reeve stared at the receiver. He felt the difference, the slight shift in timbre, when Price spoke to their channel. His voice in the intercepted recording wasn't the same tone. It was more casual, more confident, more dangerous. Diaz looked at Reeve. You're absolutely certain? Reeve nodded once. He's feeding them information. They're planning to wipe us out. Kellerman paced. This is insane. Sharp's voice sharpened. If we confront him now, he'll deny everything. Diaz wasn't listening. He was thinking. We need proof, he said slowly. And we need to stay alive long enough to use it. Another broadcast streamed through the static. Confirm strike position. Hit column from rooftop elevation. Sharp cursed. That's a kill zone. Diaz moved to the window, peering down at the street layouts. Sector 9 was a funnel, narrow alleyways spilling into a wide, open avenue surrounded by tall buildings. If Bravo entered that approach, they'd be caught under sniper fire, grenades, mortars, and they wouldn't stand a chance. Diaz turned back to the squad. We reroute, he said, and we prepare. Reeve felt the weight of his heartbeat settle. They had two choices: walk into an ambush, or build one of their own. Diaz pulled a ragged map from his pack. Faded grid lines, handwritten notes, marked paths. He pointed to a narrow street that ran parallel to Sector 9. We move their way, just enough to make them believe we're playing into their trap. But instead, we circle here. He traced a looping path around the edge of the city ruins and hit them from behind. Sharp grinned darkly. Use their confidence against them. Reeve nodded. And confirm Price's voice before we strike. Kellerman looked sick. So what happens after? We arrest him. Diaz's eyes hardened. If he's lucky. They moved fast. Reeve monitored the sky, gray turning darker. Dust curled around the edges of buildings like ghosts. Every distant echo sounded like footsteps. Every shadow flickered like a threat. The receiver crackled again. Enemy voices. Ready position. Eyes on street. Timing remains. Reeve clenched his teeth. They believed it would be easy. Bravo unit arrived near the alley mouth of their planned counter-ambush. Diaz turned to Reeve. You hear anything from Price? Before he could answer. Movement. From the far end of the alley, Price emerged. Helmet low. Vest strapped tight. Rifle across his chest. He froze when he saw them, as if he knew what they knew. Diaz stepped forward. Price. Silence. Then Price smiled. Thin and quiet. Sir, he said. Got separated from the rest of my route. Reeve heard the lie before the words ended. Diaz nodded slowly. You're just in time. There was one rule every soldier learned early. When the squad stopped speaking, the truth got loud. Reeve watched Price's hands, tense, twitching. Diaz lowered his voice. We know. Price blinked. Know what? Reeve stepped in front of him, calm, steady. I heard you on their radio. Price didn't flinch, didn't deny, didn't stutter. He just smiled, small and bitter. You were always going to hear me, he said. You listened too much. Sharp aimed his rifle. Why? Price's smile faded. Money. Family. And because this war isn't what you think it is. Diaz's voice dropped. You sold us. Price shrugged. I traded information. They paid me enough to start over. Far from here. Reeve stared at him, not angry, not shocked, just tired. Start over on our graves. Price opened his mouth, but never got to speak. The receiver exploded with enemy voices, louder, frantic. Targets missed, check position, targets gone, moving. They'd discovered Bravo unit wasn't where they expected. The trap was broken, and war rushed in fast. Diaz raised his rifle. Positions. Now, Reeve sprinted to cover. Sharp locked the alley entrance. Kellerman dove behind a fallen wall. Price turned and ran. Not toward the enemy, not toward the squad, but toward the radio signal tower that fed enemy comms. Diaz shouted after him. He's going to alert them. Reeve didn't think, didn't weigh outcomes, didn't hesitate. He chased him. Reeve sprinted down the crumbling alleyway, heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped animal. Sand and dust churned under his boots, each step loud against the broken pavement. Ahead, Price tore through the maze of ruined buildings, disappearing behind sheets of drifting desert wind. The air was thick with heat and tension. Sweat rolled down Reeve's face, and his breath grew short, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The man who had shared meals with him, shared jokes, shared shelter, was now sprinting toward a rooftop to help the enemy rain death down on their brothers. Reeve turned a corner hard, sliding against shattered tile, catching himself with one hand. His rifle bounced against his vest, and he steadied it as he ran. "Price," he shouted. His voice echoed across the empty street. Price didn't look back. Reeve's radio hissed. "Diaz." "Reeve, report." "Do you have eyes?" Reeve gasped between breaths. "Chasing Price. He's heading north toward the old telecom tower." Sharp cut in. "We'll cut him off from the right." Reeve didn't answer. A rooftop ladder came into view. Price reached it and grabbed the first rung. Reeve closed distance. 10 meters, 7, 5. Price looked over his shoulder, eyes wide and wild. "Stop!" Reeve yelled. Price shook his head and began climbing. Reeve leapt forward, grabbed the hem of Price's vest, and yanked him downward, hard. Price fell to the ground, rolled, and scrambled backward, dust clouding around them. He raised his pistol, hands shaking. Reeve froze. The muzzle pointed directly at his chest. Price's voice trembled. "I don't want to kill you, Dan." Reeve raised both hands slowly. "You already tried." Price swallowed, tears mixing with dust and sweat. "I didn't have a choice." Reeve shook his head. "You had every choice. We all do." Price steadied his aim. "You don't understand. They own everything. They know everything. They—" He cut off. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, regret, panic. And then, a sniper round cracked the air. Reeve flinched. Price collapsed backward, eyes open in shock, blood spreading across his shoulder. Reeve spun around. Enemy fighters appeared on the roof above, rifles drawn, positioned for attack. Price groaned on the ground. "They're here." Reeve dragged him behind a low concrete barrier just as bullets rained down, chewing stone into fragments. Price hissed in pain. Reeve pressed his palm to the wound. "You're not dying today." Price stared at him, shocked. "After everything I did." Reeve didn't respond. Didn't need to. Instead, he keyed his radio. "Contact North Sector. Rooftop enemy team. Multiple shooters. I have Price secured, but we're pinned." Diaz responded instantly. "Hold. We're moving to your position." Sharp followed. "Hang tight, man. We see you." Reeve leaned over the barrier just long enough to spot 3 enemy fighters repositioning. He gritted his teeth. They were trying to flank him, and the desert wind whispered one truth. If he stayed here, they'd die. All of them. He inhaled deeply, grabbed Price by the vest. "We move," he said. Price blinked. "What?" "We move now." And under a hail of bullets, they did. Diaz and Sharp reached the scene seconds before the enemy fighters descended from the rooftop. Sharp slid into cover beside Reeve. "You're insane." Reeve shrugged breathlessly. "I get that a lot." Diaz knelt beside Price, fury and disbelief on his face. "Price, what have you done?" Price coughed, blood spraying. "I can explain." Diaz's voice broke. "Later, if we survive." Gunfire intensified, sharp cracks and echoing thunder bouncing between walls. Enemy forces converged from 3 directions, confident they had Bravo cornered. Reeve listened, not to the shouting, not to the bullets, but to the radio signal humming faintly through their receivers. Enemy chatter, clipped and frantic. "They diverting? Wrong street, they behind us." Diaz grinned. "They still think we're in Sector 9. Sharp crackled his knuckles. "We turn it around?" Diaz nodded. "We turn it around." Reeve planted Price against a stable wall and gripped his rifle. "Position markers?" Sharp pointed northeast. 3 near the telecom tower. Diaz pointed west. 2 on the adjacent roof. Reeve aimed up. "And 1 sniper, northwest corner building." Diaz nodded. "You take the sniper." Reeve stared up at the rooftop shadow, a faint flicker of movement behind shattered brickwork. He breathed in deeply, focused, listened, caught the sound of cloth against stone, metal against metal, subtle, but there. He fired, 1 clean shot. Silence. Sharp laughed. "Every damn time." Diaz stood. "Bravo, move on my call. We're taking their ambush." Reeve keyed into open enemy channel. Switching frequencies, he heard Price use. He spoke clearly. "Target confirmed, strike now." On the enemy side, panic erupted. Reeve switched off the radio. "Now we move." Bravo surged forward, breaching old doorways and pushing through ruined interiors. Reeve fired short bursts, controlled, precise, hitting targets as they tried to reposition. Sharp flanked left, dropping 2 fighters. Diaz led forward, grenades bouncing off broken stone. Kellerman covered their rear. Reeve climbed onto the adjacent rooftop, heart hammering. Through dust and muzzle flashes, he spotted the telecom tower, a rusted metal spine rising above the city. 3 enemy fighters pressed against it, firing wildly. Unaware Bravo had reversed their plan. Reeve steadied his scope. 1 shot. 2nd. 3rd. 3 bodies fell. Silence followed, sharp and strange. Diaz called out. "All units clear." Sharp answered. "Clear." Kellerman, breathing hard. "Clear." Reeve scanned 1 last angle and nodded. "Clear." Only Price remained, sitting against the wall with his wounded shoulder. Diaz approached him slowly. "We saved the squad today, but not because of you." Price lowered his head, shame in every muscle. Reeve spoke softly. "Why?" Price looked up at him, eyes hollow. "They promised money. Enough to get my family out. Enough to give them a life far from all this. And when I said no at first, they threatened them." Silence. Reeve inhaled slowly. "Is it true?" Diaz stared at Price's trembling hands. "Yes," he said. "It could be." Reeve lifted Price to his feet. "You're still coming home." Price blinked. "To stand trial?" Reeve nodded. "Yes, but alive." Bravo unit returned to base under a rising sun. Warm gold brushed across the dunes. The city behind them looked quiet, empty, as if the war had taken a breath. Medical teams rushed Price away. Command rushed Diaz into debrief. Sharp collapsed into a chair and stared at nothing for a long time. But Reeve stayed outside. He walked to a quiet corner of the compound, leaned against the concrete wall, and listened to the world calm around him. Diaz eventually found him. "You saved us." Reeve frowned. "We saved each other." Diaz shook his head. "No. If you hadn't heard his voice, if you hadn't known, if you hadn't acted." He paused. "They would have buried us in Sector 9. Reeve looked away. "I wouldn't have known if I hadn't trained with him, eaten with him, listened to him." Diaz smiled faintly. "That's exactly why you knew." Sharp limped out of the barracks, smirking. "And now Command wants to talk to you." Reeve blinked. "Why?" Sharp slapped his back. "Because they don't like losing soldiers to death or betrayal. And you just stopped both." Inside the command tent, officers stood waiting. Captain Miller, stern but fair, approached first. Sergeant Daniel Reeve, she said. It's not every day a single soldier saves an entire platoon. And it's not every day someone unmasks betrayal before it kills us. Reeve swallowed. I did what anyone would have done. Miller shook her head. No. Most would have dismissed the voice, or ignored the instinct, or hesitated. She placed a small, dark box in his hand. For bravery, intelligence, and integrity in the face of mortal danger, we are proud to award you the Silver Valor Star. Reeve stared at the medal, shining even in the tense dim light. Miller continued, and effective immediately, you are promoted to staff sergeant. Sharp grinned. Told you they want to talk to you. Reeve's heart thudded. He felt heat in his throat, something hard to swallow. Miller leaned closer. War shows us who we are, Reeve. And today, you proved exactly who you've always been. Outside, the squad stood waiting. Kellerman saluted first, eyes shining. Sharp clapped him on the shoulder. Diaz simply nodded, respect in every inch of his posture. For the first time, Reeve felt something heavy and beautiful settle inside him, a weight not of duty, but of meaning. He looked toward the desert city, still broken, still burning, still whispering its secrets. There would be more missions, more danger, more battles. But today, they lived, because he listened. And because of that, he would never be ordinary again. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Epic Recon Stories. Here we tell the missions that never made the headlines, the decisions made in silence, and the people who carried them. More stories are coming soon.